chapter sort of tries to get at the mystique of why, all 10 teams all playing in the same town with, different players, players that move from team to team, yet the crowd stays with Ginebra. So it's about this Ginebra mystique, and it sort of goes back into the history of Philippine basketball. Is part of the way to explain it. One example of how powerful the crowd's effect on games is when before the 2008 finals of the import conference of the PBA, the opposing coach, when he was playing against Ginebra, said it's like us versus the Philippines. And back in the 90s, when Alaska, the team I was following, would play Ginebra, they were, anytime, first of all, it was a natural rivalry. Alaska's a milk company, so it's milk versus gin. And, I mean, the franchises actually take those rivalries serious. They think of it as like we're the wholesome milk company against the sort of the rough gin crowd, and that added to their rivalry. But it used to be notorious for throwing peso coins whenever they were upset, and I'm sort of, I don't want to give away the man behind the legend. Who I'm going to end up reading about. And coaches, this is the last sort of anecdotal thing, coaches would say that playing against Ginebra, the crowd advantage is worth maybe 7 points. So it's like you're playing against Ginebra, you spot them 7 points to begin the game. At the same time, for Nick Velasco told me that he loves to play Ginebra because his whole thing, he just wants to shut everyone up. The idea is every time he plays them, he has a chance to send 20,000 people home sad. Which, for certain types of competitors, that's really, a great opportunity. Now, the big reason that Ginebra became so popular is really, you can trace it back to one guy, Robert Jaworski, who's the most famous player in the history of Philippine basketball. I'm going to start and just read, part of the reason he was so famous because he played a very long time. His college career began in the late 60s. He stopped playing professional basketball in 1998 when he became a senator. So I'm going to read a little bit about Jaworski now. Over the course of Jaworski's 30-some years at the highest levels of Philippine basketball, the fiery point guard inspired a cult of personality that remains the heart of Ginebra mania more than a decade after he left the team in 1998. He was the most charismatic athlete in the nation's history. On the court, Jaworski was beyond intense. He was driven by a violent need to win. The moment the final buzzer sounded, however, he became gentle, amicable, and willing to grant practically any request a fan might ask of him. A barrel-chested 6'1" point guard, Jaworski wasn't particularly graceful, but he possessed uncanny basketball instincts. He could survey the court and see the future. He sensed where teammates would be and how defenses would react a couple seconds before they moved. Jaworski's Polish-American father didn't play much of a role in his son's life, but by the looks of things, the younger Jaworski inherited a brawny physique not uncommon in certain pierogi-loving precincts in Chicago. Jaworski's compact frame may not have been the prototypical basketball body, but he used it to great effect against the skeletal players of the 70s and 80s. His bullish drives to the hoop were famous for leaving trails of aching defenders scattered in his wake. Still, even in his prime, Jaworski wasn't his generation's premier talent. He wasn't even the best on his team at the time, which was Toyota. That player was Ramon El Presidente Fernandez, a 4-time MVP who owns the PBA all-time scoring record. Being one step below the truly peerless players may have spurred Jaworski to play every possession like a true believer in a holy war. Pushing, holding, tackling, tripping, stomach punching, hip checking, forearm shivering. To Jaworski, any tactic was on the table if it meant winning. His presence intimidated opponents, who knew competing against him would test their fortitude as much as their skill. He might have been even more imposing to teammates who could incur his wrath by showing any trepidation on the court. When Jaworski told a player on his side to hack someone on the other team, the order was obeyed. His teammates had no choice but to be fearless. Philip Cesar would know. Near the end of his career, Cesar played with Jaworski at Ginebra, then retired and served as one of the team's assistant coaches. And Philip Cesar was also himself one of the greatest players in Philippine history. He played for once the rival team of Toyota, which was Jaworski's team. He played for Crispa. But then later on, he sort of joined forces with Jaworski and became one of his sort of right-hand men on the bench. And Philip Cesar talked. He's still to this day is like a chain smoker. And he smoked throughout his playing career too, by the way. And he's got this, he's just got this deep, really sort of growl voice. So Cesar told me, even if you're a bakla, Cesar said, referring to a distinctly Filipino genus of hyper-effeminate transvestite, you will become tough. He will see to it. And so, but then Jaworski had this sort of flip side to his personality. You know, he was he was just foul-humored as a basketball player, screaming, taunting, attacking basically. But then he was like this Mr. Nice Guy to all of his fans, and that he sort of took to heart a very, it's like sort of like number 2 on the corny guidebook list of like cultural traits. If you pick up, probably a bookstore as good as this doesn't have Culture Shock Philippines, but it's utang na loob, debt of gratitude. To Jaworski, his fans were the reason that he was famous, that he was going to become a senator eventually, that he was all of these things. And so even though he could, knock someone out in a basketball game, he punched a ref and gave him he needed like 10 stitches. After the game, he would do almost anything to please his fans. So Jaworski seemed driven to personally express his gratitude to as many fans as possible. The man was a natural baby kisser with unlimited stamina for signing autographs, mugging for cameras, and making small talk. After games, the walk from the Araneta Coliseum to his car could take hours. As Jaworski hugged and thanked every fan who stopped to say good game or better luck next time. In 3 years of listening to Jaworski stories, I never heard anyone, his contemporaries, his admirers, or even his critics, say that he denied a fan's request. He was a one-man Make-A-Wish Foundation, dropping by schools to deliver inspirational pep talks, visiting ailing cancer patients, and stumping beside a long-time Toyota and Ginebra ball boy who in 1989 ran for barangay captain, it's like a local government position, in his hometown in Pampanga. Jaworski's appeal grew stronger as he aged, and his presence in games became more and more improbable. By his late 40s, he didn't just have a natural rapport with fans, he actually resembled them. With a receding hairline and doughy, loose flesh hanging from his triceps, Jaworski looked too lumpy for pro ball in his Ginebra Na jersey. There he was, waving a towel from the sidelines and haranguing the referees. When he would finally check himself in, usually during the fourth quarter, the crowd would explode. Jaworski's three-point shots and behind-the-back passes, once hallmarks of his venerable talent, had become something of an inside joke with his followers. The idea that he had the balls to step onto the court and pull his old tricks against guys 25 years younger than him, and the fact that many of those tricks still worked, inspired the crowd to its wildest, giddiest frenzy, which in turn boosted Ginebra's momentum. The people loved him, and in their eyes, he could do no wrong. So that's a little bit about Jaworski, and then, to